For a year and a half, China's most secretive jet existed only in grainy leaks. Then, in the summer of 2026, the world got its first real look. In late June, China Military Bugle, the official media account of the People's Liberation Army, released a video marking 10 years since the Y-20 heavy transport entered service. Most of it is what you would expect. Then, in the closing seconds, the camera sits in the cockpit of the YY-20 tanker as two crew members talk through the day's refueling run. One asks who they're fueling. The other answers, quote, "First the Master 6, then the Little 6. The camera turns to the window, and for about a second, a tailless, diamond-winged aircraft pulls alongside and slides past. Those nicknames are the tell. Master 6 is the H-6 bomber. Little 6 is the jet China has never once put on official film. The aircraft outside analysts call the J-36. There's very little known about this aircraft. According to sources, the jet first flew on December 26, 2024, near the Chengdu Aircraft Corporation facility in Sichuan, on a date that happens to be Mao Zedong's birthday, trailed by a two-seat J-20S as a chase plane. Even the name is unofficial, pinned on by analysts after photos showed the number 36 painted on the nose. From those photos, a few things are solid. It is large. It carries 3 engines and 3 air intakes, whereas most fighters fly on 2. It hides its weapons and its exhaust heat inside a broad diamond body that recalls the American YF-23. At least 3 prototypes have flown in 18 months, and the design keeps changing, which is the pace of a serious program rather than a science experiment. What no one outside China can answer is exactly what the jet is for. Analysts have called it a heavy fighter, an interceptor, a regional bomber, and a long-range strike aircraft, and the shape allows all 4. The engines are a complete guess. The combat radius figures online trace back to write-ups no one can source. One safe guess is geography. If the US and China ever fight over Taiwan, it happens across vast stretches of open water with almost nowhere to land, and range decides which jet can even reach the fight. America's frontline F-35 manages about 600 miles. China's current best fighter, the J-20, roughly doubles that. The J-36 is far bigger than either, built around enormous internal fuel and weapons bays, which is why some estimated figures going around put its reach as high as 2,500 miles. If that holds, the mystery jet flies 4 times as far as the frontline American jet it would face. Lined up in order, the releases stop looking like leaks. First flight staged on a symbolic date. A year and a half of photographs. Beijing could have shut down if they wanted. Now an on-the-record cameo. A deputy commander of the Air Force has called the aircraft the service's own take on a 6th-generation design, and no official has gone further. Each step feeds a rival's planning, while admitting to none of it. Washington has answered with worry and bravado in equal measure. Some analysts now place China 3 to 4 years ahead of the planned American F-47 in flight testing. The Pentagon's reply has been to insist its own jet will be the better machine, and to point to this video while asking Congress for the money to finish it. Both aircraft are expected to fly operationally in the early 2030s. Japan just rolled one of its newest jets onto an open flight line, where satellites and spotters could see it, then covered the entire aircraft in white cloth so no one could tell what it was. A Japanese aviation spotter caught it on June 18, 2026, and the image spread fast online, pulling 2.2 million views within hours. It shows a twin-tailed aircraft parked on the tarmac at Gifu Air Base in central Japan, the airfield where the country test flies its newest military jets, wrapped end-to-end in white fabric. You can read almost nothing off it, but the one detail that survives is size. Parked beside an F-2 fighter for scale, the covered jet looks to be about as big as an American F-15 fighter. Where it sits matters as much as what it is. Gifu is home to none other than Japan's Flight Test and Evaluation Wing, the unit that rings out new aircraft and systems before they are cleared to enter service. A wrapped airframe on that tarmac is not a stored hull or a museum piece. It's something actively being worked on, and someone decided it could not be photographed while that work went on. When we look at the fabric itself, that decision is the most informative thing in the frame. Covering an aircraft completely, out in the open air, is a choice with a cost. It says the shape, or the sensor layout, or the surface coating could not be allowed onto a satellite pass or a spotter's lens, not even for the hours the jet sat outside, because those are the very features that reveal how stealthy it is. You do not go to that trouble for a routine airframe. The sheet confirms that something worth hiding is happening at Gifu, while giving away nothing about what it is. That is exactly the job it was put there to do. But it's the timing that gives the image weight. Japan is in the middle of the F-3, its first homegrown stealth fighter, and most ambitious program in decades, built jointly with the UK and Italy under the Global Combat Air Program. A carefully concealed aircraft at the country's lead test base, right now, sits against that backdrop, whether or not anyone confirms a connection. It might be a demonstrator tied to that F-3 program. It might be one of Japan's existing F-15 fighters being tested to shrink its radar signature. From the outside, both are guesses. One nearby development is worth noting carefully. An open-source analyst flagged that Gifu recently finished a new electronic warfare evaluation facility, replacing an aging test chamber built to check fighters, jamming pods, and radar planes. A new electronic warfare site and a hidden airframe in the same place are suggestive. For now, the only confirmed fact here is the covering, and that turns out to be the point. Japan allowed the world to see that it has something at Gifu Air Base worth concealing. At the precise moment, its largest fighter effort in a generation is picking up speed. A government that wanted full secrecy could have kept the jet in a hangar, but this one rolled it right into daylight under a sheet, advertising the existence of the secret while keeping the secret intact. What is under that fabric stays there. The decision to show the world a covered shape is itself the message, and for now, it is the whole of what anyone outside Gifu actually knows. The last time a foreign power put military hardware on Cuban soil this close to Florida, it brought the world to the edge of nuclear war. And now, something new has just finished construction outside Havana. The images came out on June 18, 2026, published by a Washington Defense Research Group. They show a completed circle of 32 antennas at Bejucal, a town near Havana that hosts a signals intelligence site. A second suspected site nearby at El Salao, another spot outside the capital, remains stalled, though a freshly repaved road cutting straight through its center suggests no one has walked away from it either. When we look at what the array is built to do, the concern explains itself. It's a type of antenna field that the US and Soviets both used in the Cold War. Dozens of antennas working together to pin down the exact source of a radio signal. That makes the site useful for tracking ship movements, aircraft, and military communications across a wide band of frequencies. Now place it on a map. Bejucal sits 90 miles from Florida, within reach of U.S. naval activity in the Caribbean, shipping across the Gulf of Mexico, and air bases across the southeastern United States. That's the same corridor in which the Trump administration has been steadily increasing its own activity. A facility built to locate the origin of radio transmissions could hardly ask for a better address. Then comes the twist. The Bejucal site has carried a long-standing association with Chinese intelligence operations. Named in congressional testimony and in U.S. official statements over the years. But the researchers are careful, and the care matters. There's no public evidence that directly ties Beijing to this specific array. They can confirm what the satellites show, that the hardware to monitor American military activity is now built and very likely switched on. They cannot confirm who is sitting at the other end of it. This is no longer a plan or a rumor. It's finished, photographed from orbit, and very likely already listening. The echo of the Cold War is hard to miss. For decades, Soviet listening stations on Cuban soil pointed their antennas at the United States from this same island, the same short distance offshore. What sits at Behukal now runs on newer technology, and its most probable sponsor is no longer Moscow, but Beijing. The geography that made Cuba valuable to one rival 60 years ago makes it valuable to another today. So the United States is left with a facility it can see in perfect detail and cannot fully explain. The antennas are real. Their reach into U.S. naval and air activity is also real. The city of Kaliningrad, the Russian exclave cut off from the rest of the country and wedged between Poland and Lithuania, gets its gas in two ways: a single pipeline and a single ship. In May 2026, that ship was photographed sailing the Baltic with two heavy machine guns mounted on its roof. A clever Estonian border guard aircraft caught it with its camera just as the tanker passed Estonia's western islands on its way toward Russia. The images show two sandbag firing positions flanking the bridge, each holding a 12.7mm cord, a belt-fed heavy machine gun that spits 600 rounds a minute out to 2,000 yards. The kind of weapon you find bolted to an armored vehicle, not riding on the deck of a gas carrier. Investigative journalists obtained the photos and broke the story. This is the first confirmed case of Russia arming a civilian vessel in the Baltic. The ship is not one of the off-the-books tankers Russia uses to move oil around sanctions either. It's a legitimate state-owned vessel doing a job no other ship can do. The ship in question, the Marshal Vasilevsky, is 945 feet long and belongs to Gazprom, Russia's state energy company. It's the only vessel that can turn shipped liquefied natural gas back into usable fuel and pump it ashore at Kaliningrad, and what arrives does not go straight to the tanks and jets. It runs the power plants that keep the lights on, the heat running, and the military bases working. Take this one ship away, and half of how that stronghold stays supplied goes with it. Yet, when we look at the weapons themselves, the official story starts to fall apart. The experts who studied the images do not agree on what the two cords are supposed to achieve. Against a missile, they do nothing. Against a fast naval drone, the kind Ukraine has been steering into Russian warships, they are marginal at best, a pair of hand-armed guns against a target closing at speed. If the point were to protect this ship from the threats it would realistically meet at sea, no one would arm it this way. If defense is not the real reason, then a different one comes into view. The guns may be less about stopping an attack than about sending a message. A NATO navy that tries to halt, inspect, or board a Russian-linked vessel in the Baltic now has to weigh the odds of a fully armed response from the deck. The crew points the same way. Investigators who reviewed the ship's manifests found that almost half the people listed as sailing aboard since last August come out of the Russian Armed Forces, the National Guard, or the FSB, the security and intelligence service that grew out of the old Soviet KGB. An ordinary tanker crew moves fuel and has no reason to know one end of a belt-fed heavy machine gun from the other. This is not an ordinary tanker crew, but a merchant ship staffed to something closer to a military footing, with the men aboard to match the weapons on the deck. The now viral photos surfaced only weeks after Ukraine sent drones into Kronstadt, the island naval base that guards St. Petersburg and has anchored Russia's Baltic fleet for 3 centuries. It was the first strike of its kind, and it proved that even a harbor deep inside Russian home waters is no longer beyond reach. They landed in the same stretch of weeks, and a Russian warship fired several warning shots at a British yacht in the English Channel. Now, Marshal Vasilevsky does 2 jobs. It still keeps Kaliningrad supplied, and it now dares NATO to stop it. The guns may be useless against the drones Russia fears, but they already do what Russia wants: make every navy in the Baltic think twice before going near the one ship it cannot afford to lose.